Thank you for joining us for today's holiday webinar. Happy to have everyone here. As you know, November is next week, and I know everyone is thinking about the influx of web traffic they're about to receive. And the question is, how do we engage with these web visitors and convert them into long-term paying customers? I actually just heard a stat this morning that Deloitte forecasts an 18 to 21% increase in e-commerce sales in 2017 compared to 2016. That equates to 114 billion during the 2017 holiday season. So we know people are buying, but how do you ensure they're buying your products? That's why we're so delighted to have Johanne van Tonder speaking on this particular topic today. Johanne is the author of E-commerce Website Optimization and COO at AWA Digital, a leading international CRO agency. Johanne also teaches online marketing on MBA and undergraduate programs and has trained corporate conversion teams around the world. He writes about customer research, value proposition definition, and behavioral psychology. Today, he'll be discussing strategies on what you can do to improve website conversion, and will be illustrating some of the optimization projects he has worked on for leading brands. We also have a special guest, Sax Kuvera, Strategy and Analytics Manager for Gumtree, an eBay company. Gumtree is Australia's largest classified site with 2.5 million listings and receiving 7 million unique visitors per month. He'll be sharing some insights on their digital strategy during the holidays. And lastly, I'm Angela Bartels, Head of Marketing for Qualaroo. Qualaroo is a customer decision analysis platform. With our tools and services, we help companies convert, grow, and retain customers. I'll be moderating today's webinar. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Feel free to click here to submit questions throughout the webinar, and we'll reserve the last hour to answer as many as we can. If we don't get to your question, I'll be sure to include it in the follow-up blog post. We're also recording today's webinar, and I'll be sending out that recording to everyone registered. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Johanne, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. I'll put it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining me. Welcome. We've got quite a lot to go through, so I might go fast at some point, but I want to do this in 30 minutes and keep some time at the end for questions if there are any. And by the way, isn't that a great looking conversion rate graph at the bottom of that screen? I hope you're seeing the same screen that I'm seeing. That's not an artist rendition. That's an actual screenshot out of GA, Google Analytics. And what is that, about 100% increase on 10 months or thereabouts? And it carries on beyond that view. And if you think that you can be doing better on your conversion rate, this kind of performance is within your reach. And this is what the book that you can see there that I wrote and that some of you will receive for attending today. That's what this book is all about. And we'll cover some of those tactics and strategies on today's call with specific reference to the holidays, the upcoming peak. And it was interesting listening to some of those stats that Angela just shared with us. And the holidays are different for a number of reasons. Firstly, the people behave differently. For one, you're buying for somebody else. And this is the one time of the year that you're buying for other people en masse. I mean, there might be a month in the year where, say, you have two kids that share the same birthday month, but now you're not buying only for them. You're also buying for your extended family, your in-laws, co-workers, people you haven't seen in months, perhaps people you don't really even like. You're buying presents for all of them and gifts for all of them. And that introduces an interesting dynamic. And just to illustrate this quickly, I'll tell you this quick story. I think I'd be very surprised to hear anyone on this call disagree about the power of guarantees, right? We all hear this. Offer a money-back guarantee, and it's bound to increase your conversion. And generally, that's true. But we found an exception to that. So we work with at AWA with a gifting site in the UK. And they had a pretty great money-back guarantee, one of the best in the industry. And we found that it actually worked against them. One of their most dominant personas was the grandparent buying for their grandchild. And imagine this, you're a grandparent buying a gift for your grandson or granddaughter. The last thing you want to contemplate when you're buying that gift is having to return it. And by amplifying this guarantee, by making it so prominent, you're raising that concern that something might go wrong and it might have to be returned. And that's not how you want this to be remembered, this episode. So that's the kind of complexity that's introduced in this time. When you're buying a gift, you're also investing something of yourself in that gift. And what I mean by that is you don't give a gift just in isolation. It happens in the context of that relationship with the person that you're giving it to. How will this gift reflect on me? Also, people are highly motivated, super motivated. This means they'll put up with some of your site's quirks more than they would otherwise. And that's good for you in this period. You'll see probably your conversion rate goes up without you doing anything about it. And it's purely as a result of that. People are more motivated. But it also means that you might struggle to get them to come back and to buy from you a second time. And that's what you need to address. And we'll look at some of the strategies and tactics and how to do that. And I'm sure we all agree, Black Friday and Cyber Monday is pretty much all about getting a deal. So that's part of the psychology, and that's how it's different. And it's these kind of things that we have to keep in mind. And I'll come back to that later on in the presentation. But now just the reality check. We are 30 days away from Black Friday, which marks officially the start of this peak season that we keep on talking about. In fact, it gets scarier than that because we're already there. The season has already started. This is a Google trend curve for the search term Christmas gift ideas. And you can see it started picking up, around July this year. And it's just started snowballing since then. So we're in the midst of it. And this is why many commentators are saying, well, actually, you've left it too late. And sure, I mean, you'd be in a far better position if right now you're implementing the plans that you made 3 or 4 months ago, but we're not all there. And I'm not in agreement with that entirely. I think there's still a lot left you can do. What comes to mind here is the Chinese proverb: the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. And if you start today, there's still a lot you can do to make sure that you make the most of this peak. One of the things that I like doing and that I encourage you to do is to look into GA, Google Analytics. Look at, if you've been around for a while, look at the performance last year and the year before. Look at some trends and the kind of things that you can expect. Obviously, that peak in traffic. This is one of our actual clients at AWA. And you can see it's not a massive site. It's about 60,000 users on a weekly basis, but that doubles in around end of November, around Black Friday, Cyber Monday. You can expect something similar. In fact, it's not rare to see 2x, 3x, 4x, even more. What's interesting in this case is these guys don't have a massive brand with huge budgets. This is very much a niche site, and they didn't spend any money. This is all organic. And if you look at what's behind this, and you'll find something similar potentially on your site, is it's mainly fueled by new users. Chances are it's similar for you. And this is a massive opportunity because acquisition is expensive. And this is the one time of the year when they're coming to your site, when other times of the year they have no reason to be there. In fact, retailers on average acquire between 30% and 60% more customers in this period. That's the scale of the opportunity, and you miss it if you think short term. And I'll come back to that as well. This increase in users translates into an increase in sales, thankfully. In this case, you'll see it makes up a third of their annual revenue, not bad for a month's work. And generally also, people report about 20 to 25% of annual revenue being generated in this time. It might even be more in your organization, but that's not the full picture, because if you look at AOV, average order value, in other words, the amount of money people spend on average, then you see that decreasing significantly in this time. And again, it comes back to what we said earlier. People are looking for a deal in this time. So it might be a welcome boost in revenue. It might be a welcome cash injection. You might even need it from a cash flow perspective. And so it's a good time to fill the coffers and make up those annual revenue targets. But if that's all there is to it, you're missing the real opportunity. And the way to think about this influx of visitors coming to your site is to take a long-term view. Don't think RPV, revenue per visitor, but think LTV, lifetime visitor, or CLV, customer lifetime visitor. And I'm sure everyone knows, but just to clarify, instead of looking at what we can extract from them now here, let's look at the relationship we can build and the value we can get from that relationship in the next year or whatever that period is. It's rare that we're able to make a profit on the first transaction. I mean, do the sums in your business if you haven't yet. It's rare to see that. And even if you do make a profit, really your margin is going to start shining only on the second transaction and after that. And one of the things you can do is to set up a cohort in advanced segments in Google Analytics. So this is in GA. If you don't know how to set up advanced segments, we can maybe talk about it afterwards, but it's at the top of your console. There's a button, advanced segments. You click on it, you'll see something like this. And on the left, you've got a number of menu items. Date of first session is the one you select. And then in this case, we entered November 24th, 2016, starting date, and then December 24th. So we got that period covered, Black Friday to Christmas Eve. And this is then a cohort that we can apply in our analysis in GA. And you can do a range of things with this. But one of the things that you can do is just track how this performs in the upcoming months. So in this business, I'm still on the same business that we started with in GA. You can see that in the upcoming months, so beyond that initial period, November last year, when these users were acquired for the first time, they've spent close on 300K, actually over 300K in the months following that. And that's interesting to note, but there's a lot more you can do with that. But that's the starting point, is setting up these cohorts. GA, this is, if you're just using it in its aggregate form, which is the basic presentation of GA data, you're not getting much out of it. You're missing a big trick. You have to use GA in segments, and that's how you draw real good insights from it. Now, the one thing that this leads us to is in how you're going to be managing your marketing. And one way to think about this is the customer lifecycle marketing model. It's quite a famous one. And if this is not something you've really engaged with, I would strongly encourage you to do with. And the rest of the presentation is pretty much all about that. Because what this means is that you figure out where your customer is or your user is in the cycle. Have they transacted with you? Obviously, the people coming into your site for the first time, they are new. They're in the block on the far left. You will market to them, and the tactics you will serve them will be different compared to those who've bought. Those who've made their first purchase will go into a different sequence compared to those who are regular buyers. And then you get right to the end of that life cycle where people have gone dormant. They've stopped buying from you. And so what you want to focus on with these newcomers, people that have come into your business for the first time, and this is what's going to be happening in November and December, is you want to focus on retention and making them come back and spend money from you. I mean, one of the things that you can do, for example, this is on the transaction confirmation page. It's often, it is the page that's forgotten about. But this is when people are warm and fuzzy towards your brand. In this case, this business is using this opportunity to get some word of mouth marketing. If you have a new visitor coming to your site and they haven't bought anything, clearly one of the things you want to do is figure out how to get their email address to re-engage them, and also how you can remarket to them. Email capturing, I mean, this is so ubiquitous. I'd be surprised if there's anyone on this call who's not doing this. It's annoying, but it works. I've done a lot of these, and I've optimized a lot of these. It's remarkable how it works. In this case, the one on the right led to an increase in email sign up of 300%. And the difference there obviously is the $10 off. It's that incentive. To get this right, there are two things that you need to work on, that you need to trial, really. The first one is the message and the incentive. What is the value proposition? What are you offering in return for giving you my email address? And so that's something to play with. But the bit that's even more important is the timing, because the last thing you want to do is to bombard people with pop-ups when they land on your site, right? You want them to walk through the site a little bit. So that timing, how long have they spent on the site and how many pages have they seen? That's the real trick with things like this. And that's where I've often seen the needle move. But email is important, make no mistake. I am surprised at how many e-commerce businesses in 2017 have still not really got their email strategy waxed. For every $1 you spend on email marketing, you can expect an average return of $38. That's one of the stats floating around on the internet. You're going to hear different stats from everyone, but in my experience, it's pretty close to that, or probably even more. Here's an example. I'm going to bring Sax into the conversation here because this is from Gumtree. Sax, do you mind telling us a bit about this campaign and your strategy generally?
Certainly, Johan. So this our email strategy is pretty much always on. So we are constantly sort of trying to use our email channel to keep our customers active and engaged. I think the way I see it is it's sort of pushing them to be better users. But this particular campaign is really about reactivation, and it's an email sent out to a large cohort of our customers. I think it was about 2 million in the end. And even though the conversion was quite low, we're prompting them to, look at do a spring clean, look at the things that they are what they could sell on our site, and we're offering it obviously a discount, incentivizing it with a discount to for bumping it up or making it more prominent on the site. So as I said, like the conversion CDR was quite low, about 5%, but it generated about 100,000 new customers, and the majority of them new, or when we say new, people who haven't visited us for over a month. We sort of find that customers who come through to the site through our email channel are much more engaged than those who come through other channels. If it's a call to action to sell things, they are much more likely to post an ad than somebody who just visits the site. And if it's a call to action for responding to ads and replying, those customers are much more engaged as well. So we find it a really useful strategy at Gumtree.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it's very interesting that you spoke about the reactivation, and that talks to the Lifecycle model that I spoke about earlier, as does the next slide, if I can advance it. There we go. This is from eBay in the UK, and you can see it's targeting, it's classic reactivation. So it's targeting people on the far right of that Lifecycle model that I presented earlier on. And this is exactly why you should be segmenting by Lifecycle. There are so many ways in which you can slice and dice an audience, but that's really one of the most productive ways I found in which to do it. Now, we've been talking about tactics a little bit. These things may or may not work for you, and there's so many different variations on these things. Really, the way to find out where you should be making adjustments on your site is through user research. It was Steve Blank, I think, who said, get out of your office. The answers aren't in your office. They're outside with your customers. And I fully agree with that. We drown in data. We obsess over conversion rate and metrics like that. And so the things that we keep ourselves busy with are the things in red on this image over here. Traffic, UI, UX, analytics, the metrics, the graphs, the Excel spreadsheets. But really, the hidden stuff, the stuff in blue on this image, that's what drives those metrics and what drives all of those visible things that we're looking at. The decision-making behind all those data, but behind all that data are people making decisions, and those decisions will determine what your graphs looks like. So you need to, whenever you make a change in your site, whenever you deploy an intervention, when you make a change, you are really trying to shape that decision. You're trying to shape behavior. In order to shape behavior, in order to influence behavior, you need to understand it. And in order to understand behavior, there's no shortcut. you need to do user research. You need to get into the minds of your users. It turns out it's actually quite easy to do. In the book that I showed earlier, there are several chapters that deal with this, and there's a spectrum of tools that you can use. I'm going to introduce you just to 2 or 3 ones. In fact, when I say introduce, you probably know about them, but I'm going to give you some practical insights into how you can make them work for you, maybe a little bit better, how you can tap some really actionable insights from them. And I want to start with surveys, polls, and questionnaires, because it's probably the most underrated research tool out there. It's so damn easy. You can get it out in the next hour and you'll have actionable insights this time tomorrow. And I'm going to show you a quick case study. Canon EU is one of our clients at AWA Digital. And they've got an interesting dilemma, right? So Canon, quite a well-known brand, obviously, and a loyal brand following. But the buying relationship is not with the manufacturer. The buying relationship is with a retailer like B&H or Jessop's or Amazon. Whoever it is, that's where you're going to buy a camera from, not from the manufacturer. You go onto the manufacturer's site, this site, to find more information about the product. It gets even more complex than that, in that occasionally a product might be more expensive, up to 20% more than on the retailer side. So how do you deal with this? And this was one of the themes we addressed, and instrumental in that was Qualaroo. And if you don't know how Qualaroo works, this is an illustration. So it's a poll that slides in from the bottom of your screen, and you can target it very precisely. So you can determine on which pages it presents itself, at which times, very precise targeting rules. You can determine what it looks like. You can brand it like we've done here. And then, of course, you've got to ask wise questions. So one of the questions you can see there is, where are you most likely to buy your Canon equipment? But then there's a follow-on question, which is, do you have any concerns about buying directly from us? And notice that there's no radio buttons. We're not shoehorning people into a response. This is completely open text. And so it's an unguided response. And that's really where the power comes from. Here's just another example. At the end of the process, in this case, it's buyers. The previous 2 questions were non-buyers. They've just bought a camera or whatever it is that they bought. And we asked them, what influenced you to buy directly from us today? So you've got both perspectives there. Now, there's obviously a lot more that goes into it. For one, we ask a range of questions in Qualaroo, but we also interview customers. We do an email survey and a number of things. But just for the purpose of this exercise, looking at the thousands of responses, categorize them, and then you see the themes bubbling up to the top. And this is just a brief summary of the kinds of things that come out. Genuine products, that concern about grey imports, and then going straight to Canon to get the real thing. And then that forms the basis of an hypothesis, which in this case was the implementation, the intervention. You can see at the bottom of the bottom right of the page there, really crude, actually, quite explicit. Why buy direct from Canon? This is just to test the hypothesis. The hypothesis in this case has to do with a value proposition, amplifying that, and mirroring back to users what we've heard from customers and non-buyers, and trying to align that with the thought processes that we've observed. So again, influencing behavior. Unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to reveal the uplift, but suffice to say that this was pretty big. And in fact, it made us stay on this theme for a couple of months. So we refined it over a period of time. It became more elegant, and through a series of tests, we found the precise placement and also the precise messaging. But it all goes back to that initial investigation, using Qualaroo and using polls and surveys to understand exactly what it is that we have to work with. This must be my favorite question on Qualaroo. It's posted on the transaction confirmation page. So you've just bought from us, and we ask you, what is the one thing that almost put you off buying from us today? And most people go, what are you on about? I've just bought from you. But a percentage of users will give you really good insight. So just to summarize, you want to survey not only buyers, but also non-buyers. In fact, I'd go as far as to say you're probably more interested in surveying non-buyers because that's your opportunity. Those are the ones that you have to convert. You want to ask open questions more than closed questions. But one trick that I didn't share with you is that when you ask open questions, a good way to lead into it is by starting with a closed question. And the reason for that, but what I mean by that, first of all, is that you have a set of radio buttons. And so the opt-in is easier. So the response rate tends to be higher. And then you can follow on with an open question. If you're going to send out email surveys, and I absolutely encourage you to do so, then incentivizing them is a way to increase response rates. But, ask really actionable questions. I would steer away from, unless this is crucial to your business model or the decision you have to make, I would steer away from things like demographics and that sort of question, and get to the heart of it. And in the book, there are a number of lists of actual questions you can ask, and we can maybe talk about it at the end if we have time. But really, that's the difference between a successful email survey or not. The second one I want to talk about briefly is usability testing. I expect most people will be familiar with this, but it's where you observe people interacting with your site. Now, when I say usability testing, I would imagine most people think of using an online panel-based video service, the likes of What Users Do or usertesting.com. Those are great. We use them all the time. And what's great about them is you can launch something really quickly and get some videos back within an hour or two. So it's very agile, very quick. But there's another way of doing it. It takes a little bit more work, but it's infinitely more powerful in my experience. And it starts with live recruitment. So this is from the actual Obama campaign, and you might know this, that Obama did a great deal of A/B testing on his campaigns and a lot of user research feeding into that. And this was the actual screener. You can do this with Qualaroo, but there are also a number of third-party tools that do this specifically, that focus on this. And so this is a pop-up. It appears on the homepage. It invites the user to participate in live research. Maybe you offer an incentive. We usually do. And then the trick is you phone them up immediately. So while they're on the site, in the session, you peer over their shoulder, as it were. So you phone them up, you set up screen sharing between you, and you watch how they actually use your site. And to illustrate the power of this, a quick story. This is Betty's. Betty's is a famous chain of tea rooms in England. Quintessentially English. You have people queuing outside in the rain for hours to get in to sample their great cakes and teas. And they also have a website. And we worked with them for a while. And our consultant, Dave, did exactly what I explained just now. He had a pop-up, a live recruiter on this site, and he was talking to one of the customers. And he was asking, it wasn't progressing very far. So this guy was talking about how great Betty's was, how much he loved it, the upcoming occasion that he was looking to buy for, even down to the cakes that he was going to buy. And, he was definitely going to convert, but it wasn't progressing beyond the homepage. And I'll cut a long story short. After much prompting, he eventually went to Dave. He said, hang on, do you think you can actually buy cake directly from this site? And that was the aha moment for Dave. He thought, is it a case where cake is the kind of thing that you stand outside in the queue for an hour, outside in the rain, to buy, but it's inconceivable to buy it online? And so that was the aha moment. And he ran a quick survey using Qualaroo again, like you've seen previously, on this site, asking a very blunt question, something like, are you aware that you can buy cake directly from this site? And a third of respondents said no, they weren't aware of that. That led to him launching this very quick A/B test. It was up literally in minutes. And again, you can see the point of this, just testing that basic hypothesis. The only change here is those 9 words that I've highlighted there. Shop online now, from our bakery to your door. So it's very targeted. It tests this hypothesis that people don't know. It's inconceivable that you can buy stuff directly from the site. And so let's make it more explicit. Just those 9 words produced an 18% increase in revenue per visitor. And again, it's a similar story. that was not very elegant, so we iterated on that and eventually, built on this and found the best way of messaging this. And over time, you might have to do this in a different way, because over time people might realize, and they might understand that this is the way the site works. But certainly 3 years ago, when we did this project, it transformed the business just about. There's this very famous 5-user rule that I just want to say a few words on. This is going back to research done by Nielsen, and I think most people are familiar with this rule, that you only need to use 5 users in usability testing session to uncover 80% of your site's usability problems. Now, there are a couple of caveats. Well, the first thing is 1 user is better than 0, if you look at that graph. So even if you don't get to 5 users, just start with 1. The second thing is you want to align the users that you do usability testing on with your target market as closely as possible. Yes, it's fine to use your mother, it's fine to use a coworker, but ideally you want to use somebody from your audience, somebody who represents your target market, and that's why it's so great to live recruit. And there are a couple of caveats, but if there's appetite for it, we'll get to it at the end. These are the things that you want to do with moderated usability testing, which is what I've been talking about. Recruit users from your website, as I said. Watch them use your site live in the moment. So don't schedule a meeting with them a week later. Do it right there. Set up screen sharing with them right there, because that's an authentic session. You will learn far more from them. You stay out of their way. Stay quiet. Don't interrupt. Ask them to verbalize their thoughts. So they have to speak aloud anything that comes into their mind, even if they think it's not relevant. And the only time you get involved is when they go quiet. Then you remind them to tell you what's going on in their mind. And the last thing I'll say is that if they ask you a question like, what does this button do? Then you throw it back at them. So you don't guide them. You rather lose the sale. As painful as it is, I've done this too many times where you've actually seen a sale being lost, and you could have intervened and recovered that sale, but the insight you get from it, the learning, is far more important, because you can fix that issue and pay it back many times over. Then one more, I think there are 2 more slides. Just the last thing, I can't not say anything about split testing. I'm a big proponent of A/B testing, and it's the backbone of what we do in our agency at AWA. And I get this question a lot, especially this time of year. Should I be split testing in the holiday season? My gut response is absolutely yes. You have to make use of the increase in traffic. As you know, split testing relies on a good amount of traffic. And especially if this is your peak trading period. If you're making up 30% or more of your annual revenue, of course you want to optimize for your trade, for your peak. But there are some caveats again. And the first one, very important one, is that we've spoken about how different holiday buyers are, holiday visitors are, and how motivated they are. And that introduces sample pollution. And simply what this means is that the results you get in this period might not be the same as you'll get later on. And so therefore it's good practice to, if you get a strong win in this period, to rerun it later on, maybe February, March next year in a different period, and to see if you still get the same result. And then if not, you have to take a view on how you're going to handle that. Maybe you change the site in peak trading periods. That's something that you can consider. Another way to do it is to target only returning visitors. So when you run your A/B tests, you continue your program, your testing program as per normal, but you only target returning visitors. So that's a way to overcome that sample pollution. Another way to do it is not do A/B testing, but to do bandit tests. And this graphic from our friends at Crazy Egg, I think, explains it wonderfully. A/B testing illustrated at the top of the screen there, simply the audience split in 2, and then one variation will be declared the winner after that period of time. With bandit testing, it works slightly differently. So there's an algorithm running in the back that constantly determines which is the better performing variation and directs more traffic to that winning variation. And so in this case, what you see happening there is variation A initially looks like it's going to be the winner and therefore gets the bulk of the traffic. But over time, the algorithm realizes, well, actually it's variation C. And so it starts shunting more traffic to variation C. And the benefit of this is not only do you get a result, but you also have the benefit of that winning variation being exposed to more visitors. So it's like it's live on your site. And I want to end there. And I think if you take away only one thing from this presentation, it is to think about your holiday traffic in a very different way. Don't think about it short term. What revenue can we extract from it today? But think about a relationship, LTV, monitor that over a period of time and think about how you're going to be cultivating that relationship and what can you do, what can you set in motion in the next month to make sure that that you'll get them back into your business over the next year. Angela, back to you.
Great, thanks so much, Johan. That was great. I like your last point. I think it's important to think about this kind of all year. And come Q1 2018, I think it's a great time to kind of look back at the past quarter and you're probably, people are probably engaging in running surveys all year long. So I think it's important to take a step back and kind of look at the data that you've collected over the year to have more of a proactive approach. Okay, so I think we definitely have some questions. We had some submitted via email prior to the webinar, and then we have a couple of live ones. So I'd like to cover a few. Like I said, if we can't get to all of them today, we'll definitely add this to the blog post with the recording. Okay, so the first note we received via email from Mike. In the use cases, and I think you mentioned this a little bit, Johan, but for those that were late, I'd like to cover it. In the use cases that you've shared and reviewed, have you ever noticed differences in buying behaviors between B2C and B2B customers?
Yeah, very definitely. So I spoke about B2C customers being very motivated in this time. There's time constraint, but also they're buying on behalf of others. They're buying gifts for others. And I spoke about that psychology around that and the dynamics that are introduced. That's not there for B2B. B2B still has the long sales cycle, and it's the same pressure is not there. So, from that perspective, the two are very different.
Yeah, and I'd add too, with the end of the year coming for B2B, budgets have to be spent. So there's a lot of decisions that are being making on tools and services that companies want to use for the coming year. So it is a different pressure, obviously. Let's see, I have another question here. Okay, I think this is a great question. So you mentioned offering discounts to increase conversion for email surveys and reactivations. Should there be a concern about devaluing your product or service by lowering the cost? I think about this all the time as well. And I think, and Johan, you can speak to this, but I think it all kind of depends on who your audience is, who are you targeting. Obviously offering promotions or discounts as an acquisition play that could definitely devalue. But if you're targeting people, different segments of people that have already engaged with your product. So I don't know, Johan, I think that you might have some comments on that as well.
Yeah, thanks for asking this question, because it is a very important one. Thanks for raising it. And I think, Angela, you covered most of it there. Absolutely. It can do two things. It can devalue your brand, so you've got to be aware of that. It can erode your margins. And it can be very stupid. I mean, it can be very short-sighted. If you spend $10 to acquire a customer that you're never going to sell to again, then what does that mean to your business? I've seen businesses like that. I've worked with clients where when we started engaging with them, that was more or less the situation. There's got to be a plan behind this, and you have to track this. There's got to be a strategy behind this, and you've got to set up a cohort like I've just shown you in GA. It's a good way of doing it, and monitor the behavior and the performance of the users that you give discounts to over time, and see whether it's actually making sense in the long run. But it is a long-term view that you've got to take. You are essentially, the other way to think about this, it's marketing budget, it's acquisition budget. It's the same, you spending $10 in this case to acquire a customer. It's the same as spending $10 per click and to have somebody buy, or how that stacks up. It's a customer acquisition cost, and you've got to treat it in the same way.
Perfect. Okay, another question. So there's so many ways you can slice and dice who you want to target. What are your thoughts on prioritization? Who do you go after first, or do you run campaigns simultaneously? I mean, when you think about the traffic that you receive to your site, obviously you talked a lot about segmentation and targeting. So where do you begin?
Yeah, I think I more or less answered this question during the presentation, but let me just recap it. I would look no further than the customer lifecycle model that I presented earlier. I think that's the place to start. Of course, there are many more ways in which you can target your customers depending on your business model. It could be men, women, if you're a fashion business, or whatever is relevant to your model. But a starting point is to look at where they are in that life cycle, because they need to be treated differently each phase of the life cycle. People have just entered your site and have never bought from you. They need to see different messaging. And this applies to your remarketing campaigns. It applies to your emails. It applies to what they see on site even. And then as they progress through that life cycle, so now they've bought from you the first time, they are a first-time buyer, and they will then go into a different sequence. They should be seeing different things. So that would be the starting point. You can transform your business if you just do that, depending on where you're starting from.
Okay, what about mobile surveys? I mean, in some of the case studies, some of the projects optimization projects that you worked on, how does mobile play within that? And I guess, do you question differently? Do you engage differently, mobile versus desktop? Do you have some color around that?
Yeah, one of the interesting things, so let's take it a step back and say that mobile, I'm sure you will have seen in your geodata, is big. It's getting, most of our clients in the last year or two have seen mobile traffic starting to surpass desktop traffic. Now, only in terms of visitors numbers in most cases. The revenue doesn't quite follow through yet, but you've got to, you've got to pay attention to that, and you've got to also think about the multi-device journey and what role mobile plays. I've done a great deal of research into mobile behavior, doing usability testing remotely and doing academic studies in this area. And the behavior on mobile, well, it goes without saying, it is very different. It is, for starters, very distracted. It's not uncommon to speak to people when you're doing usability testing on mobile, to have somebody say it's 1 a.m. in the morning and they're feeding their child, and they've got they're feeding the baby and they've got one hand on the phone, or they're cooking dinner with one eye on the phone. And so that's not the environment within which a transaction happens. So you've got to understand that behavior. But the other thing to remember is when you present overlays, screens of the mobile, is that since I think last year or the beginning of this year, I can't remember when this rule came in, but there's a penalty from Google for presenting too big an overlay on your mobile screen. Now, you're safe with Qualaroo because that's built into it, that's baked into it. So the way in which Qualaroo presents the mobile screener, I've gone into great detail. You're not at risk of that penalty. But I can't vouch for other tools. So that's something to keep in mind. But to get to your question, absolutely, you should be including mobile in your analysis, especially if it's a big piece of your business. If you're seeing that traffic eclipsing desktop, like we've seen on many other sites.
Great. Yeah, mobile is huge, and we're seeing that trend as well. a couple more questions, and then for the ones that I wasn't able to get to, we'll leave for the follow-up blog post. So Johan, you talked about, I think cart abandonment. So that's something that, obviously is super important when it comes to e-com, but also for even SaaS businesses, not finishing up the shopping cart process. Should you always lead with a coupon code or some type of discount, or are there other ways to reel people back in?
If you can get away without a coupon code, then that's a good place to start. Coupon code is easy. That incentive, it does convert, and people find it to be very successful. It's the kind of thing I would test. What else do you have to offer? But just the question in terms of whether this applies more to e-commerce than it does to SaaS, which is a more general question, I would say it probably applies even more to SaaS. The only thing that doesn't really apply is the holiday season. I would agree with you that the rush maybe is not as defined in SaaS as it is in e-commerce. But even so, in many of the SaaS businesses that we work with, we see that rush coming through. We see many SaaS businesses giving discounts around Black Friday. I have spoken to many end users, clients of those SaaS businesses who actually wait. So they delay their purchase to November, expecting there to be a discount. So there's that dynamic as well. But then apart from the holiday peak, whether you get that peak in your business or not, you'll know from your GA from last year if you look at the patterns. This concept of lifecycle marketing and the concept of LTV and getting more out of your customer applies far more to SaaS, I would argue, than it does to e-commerce, because it is very much, the business model is very much about getting that recurring revenue. So you've got to be all over that.
Great. Okay, one last question. So for somebody that has a small business, they receive a large number of server replies. How do you deal with that for small business?
Say that again, Angela. Sorry, I missed some of that.
How does one deal with a large number of survey replies if they're a small business?
All right. If you're a small business, chances are you won't have a large number of survey replies. Let's be honest here. It's probably in the region of 1% of your users that respond to open text surveys. Closed surveys might have a higher response rate, and it might also be different for your customer base. I've worked with clients who have very responsive customer bases, and you see high response rates. But I think my answer would be you have to plow through it. It is worth it. The insights that you get from looking at the survey responses will pay dividends. It will pay for your time many times over. It will steer you in the right direction. It will point you to exactly what you need to do. And then it's up to you to actually make that intervention, to actually fix the problem that's being highlighted. Any time that you invest in getting to understand your visitors better, getting to understand your customers, and getting to understand where are the opportunities for improvement on your site, I would say that's time well spent. So especially as a small business, that's absolutely what you have to do. I'll tell you one quick story. I ran an e-commerce site for 3 years, and I was CEO, and on weekends I would do deliveries. And my investors said to me, "But you're crazy. As CEO, that's not how you should be spending your time. You should be working on the business, not in the business." And I said to them, "But hang on, that's exactly how I should be spending my time, because by making deliveries to customers on the weekend, I get to meet my customers. I get to see who they are, where they live, what the circumstances are. I get to speak to them. I get to find out what it is that made them buy from me. And more than that, I get to show them there's a real face behind this business." That's a secondary objective. Primarily, it's about getting in touch with your customers and understanding what it's about. This is the core of marketing, is knowing your target market, knowing your customers, knowing their pain points, knowing how you can serve them better. If you can put your finger on that, you will grow your business. And so I would say to a small business owner, that is something you should prioritize.
I love that story. So you were doing deliveries. That's great. That's a, I think, so I think we're all done with questions, but I think that was a really good point, and a really good ending. I mean, I think the most important thing here is really just thinking about your audience and targeting correctly. And you have all the data in terms of where your users are coming from, how many times they have visited, how long they've been on your site. And so you should use that data to really target, really fine tune your targeting versus just doing mass engagements with everyone, and to really increase your response rates and your engagement with your users. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, Johan, this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for being here. Sax, thank you as well. Both Qualaroo customers, and lucky to have you guys here. So again, I will be following up with a blog post with some of the questions. And you will also be receiving the recording to today's webinar that you can share. All right, Sax, Johan, do you have anything else?
No, thanks for your time. Thanks for arranging this. I enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being on the call.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much, Angela. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.